What we need is 2 bar stools and a pint.
I know. That's the right thing to do.
I have bar stools. I have no pint. I've got champagne.
What's in the fridge? Exactly.
You've always got to have champagne.
Champagne on ice. Yeah, absolutely. Just in case something good
You
happens.
never know when it's a celebration. Yes, the reason we're here, we want to sort of explain why we're here.
Yeah.
So last year's good revival, the St Mary's Trophy. Obviously, we had a disaster at our end. We had a valve drop. So it's one of those things. But
yeah,
once we got through Goodwood and we were really successful that weekend, I came to you in your other role.
Yes.
And as you know, what we do, I strive to be not against the grain to be on purpose, but to be against the grain for the right reasons. Yeah. And that's where you and I connect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I run Classic Engine Workshop. One of the things that we strive for is always to move the game on and look for minor advantages and anything that we can get to really take these old engines and make them into something special.
Yes.
And it's wonderful working with someone like you and William Heynes, the company, because you have a very similar mindset, and we have a great synergy when it comes to that approach.
Yes.
So when you came to me with the race engine, I was excited that we could do something quite special, and we'd already been building engines for your road car projects. So it was really nice at that point to be able to say, right, we're going to take all of that learning we've got in terms of making those engines reliable, robust, and also giving them the right look and appearance, you know, which is so important at this end of the market. And then driving towards taking the best of current technology in order to make the engine as good as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
So we're restricted, obviously, with the design of the engine and the FIA regulations around it. We have to be using things like original blocks and heads and those kind of things, geometrically. But within that, we're able then to do things like porting and other modifications to the engines, which creativity. Yes, exactly. Professional creativity.
I think, from my point of view, from my professional point of view, emotionally, I'm very attached to engines because it's a family product.
Yeah.
But why not do something if it's there? And
exactly.
your ability to question the general guard at the moment, where there are so many people go to so many suppliers to get the same product back.
Yeah.
But everyone ends up with where we are at the moment. So let's create and curate the next level of professionalism, which has actually been lacking in lots of areas of the industry. And then going to CNC, it's not our fault. It's not the industry's fault that these boys are getting older. But the people who are doing the work physically on machines, there's a lifespan because there isn't enough young people coming through.
Yeah.
So that's when you came in.
So and what we've looked to do is use CNC to do a few things. Firstly, to correct all of the geometry and get everything back into factory tolerances. So that's the alignment of the cylinder head, things like the valve guides, the tappet guides, the chamber volumes, and the basic geometry of the head, and bring that back, and we call it blueprinting.
Yes, absolutely.
So bringing it back to what was specified originally. So that's a great starting point.
And it's really difficult, these engines now, because they have a shelf life.
Exactly, yeah.
So your job and your brain is to, if that engine's been about part maybe once before, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 times before, it's to create the foundation again. Otherwise, you're chasing your tail all the time within the machining process.
Exactly right. So we use welding to correct. I mean, the engines are getting older, right? So you see things like occasionally you get cracks, you get damage, you get corrosion damage, and all these kind of things. The cores are getting, the reliable source of second-hand parts is getting harder and harder to find a good one.
Yeah.
So you find the best one you can, and then we go through everything to start with to check it's a good casting. So we do pressure testing, we weld any corrosion issues, and we re-slot and resize it all back to how it should be.
Yeah.
So we start with what we think is the best possible raw casting.
Yeah.
And then from that point onwards, it all goes, the jig alignment starts with the cam center lines. The cam center lines really are for the XK cylinder head, they're really the datum off which everything goes. So we start with that, and we've made, for the CNC rig, we've made a jig of 4 bridges which pick up across the cam center lines, and then you can flip the head upside down so that the chambers are facing upwards, and everything is perfectly aligned to the cam center lines from that point onwards.
It's the only way.
It's the only way. It's the only proper way to do it.
And that's why we work well together.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it has to be right.
Has to be right, yeah.
And there's only certain finite time left.
Yeah.
So we have to get the product right, especially when the engines are worth so much money.
Yeah.
If we've got one of these OBL or equivalent cars in this building.
Wonderful.
For instance, we've got chassis 30 behind us. We've got chassis 43 here. And there's £1 million there.
Yeah.
And if you get one of those engines wrong and you scrap that cylinder head, you've lost potentially 40% of value.
Yeah.
So to dial out human error, but get a better product, and then we've got that product programmed.
That's right.
Then it's there for the foreseeable.
So some of the nice things that we've done is we've done development on heads that are scrap or whatever, so that we know that all the tool paths are cutting in exactly the right place, and we're not cutting into water jackets or damaging any of the cylinder heads when we do the CNC porting. And of course, the beauty about CNC is that there's an amount of almost artistic work goes into the development of it, but once you've done it, it's ultimately repeatable. You can repeat it to the micron every time. So the cylinder heads come out the same every time. So once you've done that work, and it's very arduous, expensive, and difficult development work, but once you've done it, you've got a product which is as good as it could possibly be. And I like to use the phrase OEM plus. It's how it would have come out of the factory if they could have spent infinite time on each one getting them exactly right to tolerance.
If my grandfather, when he designed it, had these tools
technology,
he would think we're utterly ridiculous if we do not use it. So it's just progression.
Yeah, exactly.
But it also, by doing that, you just done a 4.2 for us, a long stud, standard 4.2 engine, and it was just like butter. So
creamy.
I hate to use the word sexy, but it was sublime.
Yeah.
And that is down to professionalism in measuring, professionalism in machining, and the correct time allocation in assembling and then running it up. Our end is to basically do the heart transplant. My trust is in your ability to do the process. And then that also links importantly to oil choice.
Indeed.
Because you've got to be running the right stuff.
So thank you very much for that.
That's right.
Really complimentary about the work we do. What we love about working with you is that you give us the time to do the job properly, and you recognise that that's the only way to do it. When it comes to oil choice, originally when these cars were new, there would have been instructions for running in, and that would have been, drive it gently for 1,000 miles maybe.
Yes, yeah.
Now with modern machining, plateau honing and that kind of stuff, you can run one of these cars in 200 miles.
Yeah.
And the advice is not to drive it gently either, but to use moderate throttle settings. Not allowed it to lug too much or anything like that, but to drive it firmly.
Yes.
And of course, the science behind that is the compression forces push those the piston rings out against the cylinder walls, and that motion up and down beds those two components together.
It's a lovely progressive torque. It's a very hard thing to explain.
Yeah.
But it's when you're revving through in second and third, you're not doing a hard pull second or third, that's 4,000. You're doing to 2.8 and you're doing about 3/4 throttle.
But firm, it's that firmness.
Progression.
It's
like hydraulic progression.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's linear. Yeah. And so you're working up towards. Now, once you've bedded those rings in, that oil has to be dropped out.
Yeah.
By its very nature, the running in process knocks off small peaks in the machining process, and that is putting metal flake into your oil. You don't want that to circulate. It all gets caught by the filter. So you very quickly, after a couple of 100 miles, you do your first oil change, drop it out, and throw away the old oil filter, put new filter and oil in, and away you go. Now, of course, that's the point at which you want no further wear to occur.
Yes.
So from that point onwards, once the running in is done, which is almost a deliberate wear process, you're now onto preservation and ensuring the longevity of the newly freshly built engine. And the way to do that is to choose an extremely good quality premium oil for the XK engine of 2050, perhaps for a race engine 2060 is quite popular. And that's what you'd be looking at. And what we also recommend is a lubricity enhancer, which reduces the amount of wear and gives you a longer service life.
And what's that? Not sort of plugging it, but we sort of, So what's your recommendation for that?
So the one we've selected is the Wagner Micro Ceramic. It's a German oil product. It's relatively new into the UK. And essentially what it is it's nanoparticles of ceramic. They're spherical particles, so they're like balls. You can only really see them under extreme magnification. You certainly can't see them with the naked eye. It almost looks like double cream when you pour it in. It's a whitish colour. Yeah. And if you looked at it under a microscope, it would be almost like little balls. Yeah. And the idea is that those balls coat both sides of the metals that are working together and the friction faces and surfaces within the working surfaces within the engine. And they act as rollerball bearings. Now, that's lovely during running conditions, but where it really comes in is if the car has been parked, the oil has gone down, and you're starting on dry bearings, those kind of things. You've got that layer, the sacrificial layer of ceramic additive between the bearing surfaces when you start up as the oil is priming around the system.
It's like a modern version of graphogen.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
It's that initial cushion, so you don't have don't split a lower bearing or top bearing. You have that initial inertia. That's that cushioning, and in my world, when you've got a lot of customers who've got high value in storage, when they might be started once a quarter, then that initial inertia on starter motor, that's the damage. That's the damage limitation.
Yes, exactly right. And graphogen's a really, really good analogy for what this stuff is, because that is also a solid lubricant.
Yes.
So that's an older version of it, but it's a solid lubricant that goes within the oil and protects the surfaces. Now we have the ceramic particles. It's high-tech stuff, but it's exactly the same fundamental principle.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's
really cool. It's geeky, but in all the right ways.
Yeah, and because it's a solid particle, it doesn't mix with the oil. It doesn't affect the viscosity of the oil or the properties of the oil, but it's suspended in the oil and spread throughout the oil. So it doesn't affect the oil. It doesn't make it thinner or less, or anything like that. It just runs throughout the oil.
It's just total common sense.
Total common sense.
Because it's really hard when we put our name to something. And you put your name to your engines, it has to be right, and have that. It feels weird putting a product in the engine which you're not used to. Yeah. It's quite unnerving, actually. Yeah. But it makes completely mechanical, logical sense to do it, and I think it's the stupidity of us not doing it. I just wish we were doing this 10 years ago, because we would have saved thousands of pounds by not having.
I mean, it protects the assets. I mean, there are oil additives that we can use within the engine, gearbox, and so forth, and that's great for the mechanical components. There are also fuel system protectors that we can add. Now, particularly valuable for cars which are stored and not used frequently. Even the best quality Supra unleaded has 5% ethanol. The lower quality stuff has 10% ethanol. So we've got quite high quantities of ethanol in our pump fuel. If that sits in your tank, then it condenses out water into the fuel, and that water can breed bacteria. The bacteria excrete an acid, and that acid can damage everything from the tank, the carburetors, the fuel pump, unions between fuel lines, all that kind of stuff, right the way through to the engine itself.
This is the biggest problem we've got in the automotive industry at the moment, in the classic car sector. Yeah. Because it just destroys all your fuel lines, your diaphragms and your carburetors, your needles, everything. So it's I mean, you've spoken very clearly about this for a few weeks now, and to put things in perspective, we've given a significant amount of that product to one of our best and leading clients who's got a very large 200+ car collection. To have the ability to go to a client saying, this is going to resolve thousands of pounds a year in maintenance costs just doing seals, diaphragms, in the carbs. It's a game changer in any part of the industry. But at our level, and consumer confidence to go into clients' facility and say, this is what's going to save you money.
I mean, I think sometimes these products can be a fad product.
Yes.
And it's worrying that might be the case. In the case of the Bactofin product that we're talking about, so this is the Wagner Bactofin product, that has had great success in commercial and fleet and marine applications as well. And what that tells me is it really works, because they are people who are not interested in buying things because they love the vehicles.
Yes.
They're buying it because it's a commercial decision. It makes sense. And of course, what it's doing is protecting them and reducing the number of injectors that they have to change, the number of fuel pumps they have to change. And of course, those things are incredibly expensive in commercial vehicles and marine applications.
You also give me this biodiesel one. Can
Yes.
you explain about that?
So so the diesel additive is a very similar product to the Bactofin. Now, the Bactofin is for petrol and petrol ethanol mixes. The diesel additive is a very similar product, has the same effect, but the issue with diesel is a thing called diesel bug, which is very similar. It's the water in the diesel causes bacterial growth. Now, diesel is a different fuel from petrol, and therefore the chemical solutions are different. But essentially, it does the same product.
And that's what the excretion is, that sort of slimy,
yes.
sort of greasy.
So diesel bug is a nasty, slimy
it's
stuff.
What you get on when you go on holiday and you slip down the slipways. That's sort of slimy.
Yeah, that's
nasty
slimy business. And of course, it blocks it blocks your fuel feeds and injectors and all sorts of stuff. And it's very serious. And not only that, but it is an acidic, corrosive substance. And it will damage your fuel system. So
I guess it would have a positive effect to EGR valves and that side of things as well. It's a bit cleaner burning.
Yeah, it runs throughout the system. I mean, what we see is cleaner combustion. It actually, the technology captures water, binds it chemically, and then it's burnt out of the exhaust. So it also gets rid of it. And what's nice about both of those products is they're fuel preservatives. So if you leave fuel in a tank, it will go stale.
Yes.
And very often you have to pump it out and get rid of it.
It's a
nightmare. This is a fuel stabilizer, so it maintains the octane rating. It acts as a lead substitute as well. So if you're using a car which hasn't been converted to to unleaded fuel, then you can add the Bactofin product or the diesel additive product. And that will stabilize that fuel, and it will lubricate the valves as it goes through. And not only the valves, but any moving parts within the fuel system. It
really is a mental game changer. I mean, we've got a preservation car here, so this is a totally original car from '61. Original fuel lines, everything's original. And fuel only lasts a week in there. So it is a total game changer by having this product.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It is, and where preservation is important, just extending the life of the existing components, the original components. It's only original once.
Yeah, it is. We've got a car here, which we thought we had a slight timing issue, and it turns out it was actually a fuel issue. So we've been chasing our tail for a couple of days. Workshop manager today, David, said actually everything's fine. It's a fuel ethanol issue. That fuel's been in that car for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and we've probably wasted a day and a half workshop time
messing around.
So it is a big issue.
Yeah, and ethanol is really quite serious because apart from anything else, these cars were not really originally designed to run with ethanol content. So when we rebuild carburetors, for instance, we will swap to modern rubber substitutes. So things like nitrile and Viton. Which I think are both brand names, but they're a modern elastomer product, which replaces the seals and makes sure that they're not rotting away with the
swell up.
And they swell up, or they blister, or and that of course very quickly can transform a freshly built set of carburetors into useless if you weren't using those upgrades. So upgrading the components, particularly fuel lines, rubber fuel lines, can be eaten away by ethanol. So it's really important for anybody who's running a classic car to upgrade to an ethanol-proof rubber line.
It's also modern classics, XGSs, DB7s, that era. They've also suffered.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
There's all sorts.
It's very exciting.
It's exciting. So we're trying to sort of get ahead of this curve, and ethanol was a very scary discussion in the classic car world when it first came out.
It's been the buzzword for the last 5 years and it's
and now we're seeing ways of addressing it.
Yeah, it's nice because the technology's there to make these cars work, and actually they're all carbon negative anyway. So we went down that route by actually proving of a modern fuel, a modern product can make stuff go longer.
And I think as we move forward, there's going to be sustainable fuels that come into that as well. So,
and also sustainable oils at some point as well.
Sustainable fuels and sustainable oils. In fact, there are some of those starting to creep into the market already. So it's a very exciting time for preserving something which has the internal combustion engine has been demonized for a long time as being an environmental disaster. We're starting to address those concerns, and strangely enough, it's starting to come out to be actually a sustainable product to have cars that have been on the road for a long time and are well maintained. Every mile that you do in those is actually very low carbon now.
When are we doing the podcast? This is cool.